Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating intersection. We're looking at the raw, incredible efficiency of artificial intelligence, but also the absolute necessity of the human touch. We're going to see how AI can save us literally hundreds of hours on the back end. But more importantly, we'll learn why applying genuine human emotion and professional audio techniques is really the only way to make your automated content truly resonate with an audience. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start by building an automation foundation to handle the boring stuff. Then we'll pivot to the creative side, looking at why human prosody matters, how to actually direct AI voice performances, the art of balancing your voice and music, techniques for frequency carving, and finally, the steps for a polished audio master. All right, let's get right into it. Okay, Section 1, the automation foundation, setting up AI for administrative efficiency. Before we can get totally creative with audio, we kind of need to understand the sheer time-saving power of raw AI output. So, to illustrate this, let's look at how restaurant managers are doing it. Instead of manually typing out responses for shift swaps or drafting the same training documents over and over, they're using this incredibly structured three-step process. First, they grab an API key from Claude. Second, they pick a repetitive use case, like staff asking to swap shifts. And third, they connect Claude to their system using a no-code tool like Zapier. Suddenly, a staff member texts a request, and boom, the AI drafts a perfectly professional response based on restaurant policy in about 2 seconds. The manager literally just hits approve. I mean, the value of this raw automation is just massive. By letting AI handle those mundane tasks, a single restaurant gets back over 180 hours and saves more than $5,000 a year. It's a huge win for efficiency. And here's the crucial takeaway for us today. This exact same efficiency applies perfectly to audio content creation. The catch? When we move from back-end admin work to front-facing content, that raw, unpolished automation just isn't going to cut it anymore. That brings us to Section 2, why human prosody matters, and the psychological impact of a human voice. The biggest problem with raw automation in content is that if you just dump a block of text into a generic AI voice generator, you get this robotic, flat delivery. And if your AI voice lacks emotion and natural pacing, your audience's listening comprehension just tanks, and they instantly tune out. And this academic study brilliantly illustrates exactly why. Researchers looked at prosody, the rhythm, the intonation, the stress we put on words, and how it impacts listening comprehension. When they had children listen to descriptions read in an emotionally positive tone rather than a neutral, robotic one, their accuracy in answering questions absolutely skyrocketed. It turns out intonation and a human-like voice aren't just nice little bonuses, they are psychological necessities that directly aid learning, retention, and human connection. So, how do we actually fix this in our automated workflows? Well, that leads us to Section 3, directing AI voice performances, getting the best from tools like 11 Labs and Mix Voice. Because just like a manager has to direct an employee, a content creator has to give really clear, specific directions to an AI model to pull out a natural performance. AI doesn't automatically get the emotion behind your text. It only reacts to the specific cues you feed it. Let's use 11 Labs as an example to see how to choose the right tool for the job. Look at the stark contrast between their two major models. The multilingual V2 model is your stable, reliable workhorse. It is perfect for tutorials and explainer videos because it doesn't give you these wild, unexpected emotional swings. On the flip side, the V3 model is highly expressive. It's built for cinematic storytelling. And the biggest technical difference is how you actually control them. V2 relies heavily on your script's punctuation, while V3 actually lets you use audio tags, like writing out the word excited in brackets to force a specific emotion. Let's see this in action. On the left, imagine a raw, formal script. If you write, "The following methodology should be implemented. We finally did it." An AI will read that exactly as written, flat, monotone, super boring. But look at the directed script on the right. We've thrown in conversational language, an ellipsis to force a natural pause, and an explicit bracketed tag to trigger excitement for the V3 model. Instead of a robot, you get something like, "Here's what actually works. We finally did it." It's a complete game changer. It transforms a sterile text dump into a dynamic performance. Beyond rewriting the script itself, there are some absolutely crucial rules of thumb to avoid that robotic narration. First, tweak your pacing to the sweet spot, around 120 to 150 words per minute. Next, break up those long, dense paragraphs into shorter sentences so the AI naturally knows where to breathe. Oh, and here's a surprising one. Always spell out your numbers.
Writing out the word 42 instead of using the digits drastically improves how the AI handles pronunciation and rhythm. Also, in your settings, try pulling the stability slider down to about 35 to 45%. This adds those slight natural imperfections to the voice. And finally, use dashes to create stronger, more dramatic rhythm variations in your sentences.
All right, which brings us to Section 4, balancing voice and music, ensuring the narrator is actually heard. Because let's be real, even the most expressive, perfectly humanized AI voice is completely useless if it's buried under your background music. The golden rule here comes straight from the W3C accessibility standards. Your background music should sit exactly 20 decibels below your foreground speech. This specific ratio is magic. It makes sure the music weaves in subtly behind the narration, building the mood without ever competing with what's being said. Because if your music is even a little too loud, people are going to strain to hear, get frustrated, and just click away. To keep this balance effortlessly, audio pros use something called sidechain compression. Basically, it's an automated ducking effect. Say you're using a plugin like TrackSpacer in Adobe Premiere Pro. You can set the system to constantly monitor your voice track. The second the AI voice starts speaking, the plugin automatically and gently turns down the background music. The moment the voice takes a breath or pauses, the music beautifully swells back up. It is such a slick, hands-off way to make sure the narrator always cuts right through the mix. So our volumes are perfectly balanced. Now we move to Section 5, frequency carving and ambience, the final polish for a natural sound. This is where we play with the sonic environment around the voice to give it that hyper-realistic feel, starting with some very clever equalization. Think of it like this. Human voices occupy a very specific neighborhood on the audio spectrum. The most crucial frequencies for actually understanding speech live right between 1 and 3 kilohertz. If you drop in sound effects, like a passing car or a loud swoosh, that also have loud frequencies in that exact 1 to 3 kilohertz range, they're going to clash. Your voiceover will sound muddy and muffled. The pro trick here is to use an equalizer to slightly boost your voice track in that range, while actively cutting your sound effects track in that exact same 1 to 3 kilohertz range. You are literally carving out a little pocket in the sound effects for your voice to sit inside perfectly. Now, what's really fascinating here is how human psychology can basically trick the ear and mask digital imperfections. You know why AI voices often sound kind of fake? It's because they're totally isolated in a digital void. They lack the subtle acoustic reflections of a real physical room. But by just sliding in a really low-volume ambient background track, maybe the distant hum of a subway, soft office chatter, or even a running shower, you instantly ground that sterile voice in reality. Our brains hear that environment and automatically perceive the voice as much more authentic and natural. It's a total game changer. And that brings us to the final step in our production pipeline, Section 6, the final audio master, polishing the track for export. This is where we take all of those beautifully mixed elements and shine them up to meet strict professional broadcast standards. Let's walk through this highly satisfying 6-step mastering sequence recommended by the folks at Sage Audio. First up, we apply a gate to totally silence any lingering background hum between words. Next, we use EQ to pull out any weird nasal problem frequencies. Third, we hit it with a de-esser to soften those really harsh, piercing S sounds. Fourth is compression, which just transparently squeezes the audio so the quiet parts and loud parts sit closer together in volume. Fifth, we add saturation, just a tiny touch of digital tape warmth to make the voice sound rich and full. And finally, we drop a limiter on the whole thing to catch any rogue audio spikes and boost the entire track to our final target loudness. And speaking of target loudness, here is a tangible takeaway you absolutely need before you hit export. Different platforms have super strict requirements for how loud your final video should be, which is measured in LUFS. If you're uploading to YouTube, you want to set your limiter so your final master hits exactly -14 LUFS, with a true peak max of -2. But if you're mastering for a streaming giant like Netflix, the standard is way quieter, sitting down at -27 LUFS. Hitting these precise targets is what ensures your automated content sounds professional on any device, whether someone's watching on a giant TV or just listening on their smartphone. Wow, we have covered a ton of ground today. We moved from the incredible administrative efficiency of a raw API setup all the way into the nuanced, emotional direction of AI voices, and finally, the technical precision of professional audio mastering. You officially have the tools to automate your creative workflow without ever sacrificing that absolutely vital human touch. So the only question left for you is, how are you going to apply these techniques to make your next project truly unforgettable? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.